Good. I'm a little late. I have to drop mine away.
You know. Right. Later just she didn't start talking yet.
No. Well, actually, it's Catherine's going to be the one to start talking. So, the tickets. I can't wait to hear
Yeah, I was just saying that I know. We're going to go eat so Wednesday of the week.
Yep.
And then Thursday, 9 days. So I'm just getting back.
Ready to start? Welcome, everybody. Grab some breakfast if you like. Coffee, and I have a new caterer, so you have to tell me what you think. That's quite good. So, welcome, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm Catherine Wygant-Fawcett, the Executive Director of the IFOB, otherwise known as the Institute for Family-Owned Business. Very long name. Thank you to Key Private Bank for being our title sponsor for the How To series that we're kicking off today. And thank you to Hudson University and Russell, who gets us all the tech and everything that we need here, and Maine Biz and HR Convention for also helping to sponsor us today. Okay. Welcome to our remote users, and again, thank you for helping us pull that together. We'll also be recording this for YouTube so that we can all see it later if people weren't able to make it. See what we have. The IFOB is a nonprofit that helps family businesses succeed. We have over 50 programs this year. All members and future members are welcome, so you can check out our website. And on the front table is my fabulous chart that says green is good, green is go. So everybody can come. If you're a female, you can come to the pink ones too. We have a lot of educational programs, at least 50 different programs. We work also with affinity groups, with women in family business, CEOs. I have CEO dinner tonight, and the next generation. We have a leaders in transition for the next generation. We say, you know what, mom and dad really need one of these groups to help them too. So we help everybody. And then pick one up on the way out. And then it's that time of year for the Maine Family Business Awards. We are celebrating 20 years for the awards and 25 years for IFOB. If you fill out the nomination, it's easy. You go to our website, you log on. We have some fabulous prizes. Lindsay's giving away Giffords ice cream. Hussey Seating is giving away a chair. We have a Bruins shirt, jersey that's been signed by all the teams. So fun things. And we have this year, we're doing a little bit competitiveness. And the bankers are rocking it. So if you're financial or consultants or others, you got to help send in some nominations. So out front is a flyer on that. And then this year, our fabulous task force said, well, let's showcase what people get when they fill out the application. So if they take the time to answer the questions, you don't have to be members of the Institute. It's a way for us to learn about family businesses and family businesses to learn about the Institute. And we will have the event on June 5th at the Holiday Inn by the Bay. If they're here today, they'll take good care of us. So if people fill it out, they get 2 free tickets to the award night. That is June 5th, and we're going to have Sean Gorman from L.L. Bean, the great grandson of L.L. Bean, and it's going to be fun with over 400 people. And then they get a complimentary membership to the Institute through the rest of the year, and if they make it all the way to the beautiful crystal piece, they have a lot of prizes and things that tie in with that. And then, where are we next? So I also have an exciting announcement that we have partnered up with Down East. So Down East is a family-owned business, and in celebration of our 25th anniversary, they're going to do a special write-up about the Institute and other family businesses, and they're offering 25% off their regular rates. So you don't need to be a member to do it, you just need to be a family business and talk about how fabulous family businesses are. So those, again, are out front. And then today, we are kicking off our How To series, How Do You Do It? So we will have Kim Wolak, the Chief Operating Officer from the Wolak Group and one of our board members. We have Peter Lowe from Brann and Isaacson, and then we have Linda Varrell from Broadreach Public Relations. And in a few minutes, I'll have them join us. And out front is postcards for you, so you can sign up for those. They're 3 separate different programs. You don't have to be one of them. Not. And we do have people remoting in, so if you can't go in person, you can remote in. And I found these gloves were up on the table, so I don't know if these are. Again. Please take care of these things. Thank you, that's good. All right, and then towards the end of the program, I will get up and we have some prizes. I will invite Heather Bassett up in a minute to tell us what her door prize is going to be. I have a highly coveted, hard to come by IFOB golf ball, and perhaps ice cream. Oh, and ice cream. So I'll come around and I'll get your business cards, because it's our little bribery for you to fill out the survey for today, because then that helps us do our programs for next year. So I will invite Heather up to kick us off. Thank you so much. I'm supposed to do my clicker. Technically. Okay. Is it working? Oh, there we go. All right, so here we are. Next, thank you, our sponsors, our speakers, and
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. A lot of faces I don't recognize. It's a new group for me. We're new members. Earlier in the summer of last year, well, actually for a year now, I've had a couple of people say, "You have to meet Catherine. You have to meet Catherine." Okay, who's this Catherine? So I finally got a chance to meet Catherine. And I'm from Strategic HR US, and we're the producers of the annual Maine HR convention that happens up at the Samoset Resort in May. And we have a lot of crossover. A lot of our attendees and sponsors and exhibitors are part of this association. And that's why so many people were saying, "You gotta meet Catherine," partly because we're cut from the same cloth. You're a dynamo. Oh my gosh. So when you're in the event management business, you grow to appreciate people like Catherine. I know what you're talking about. So I am so pleased to have met Catherine finally. And we're new members, as I mentioned, and we're all about education. So we're also closely associated with the many human resources associations throughout the state. We partner with them to produce this annual HR convention. And don't let the word or the letters HR scare you, even though we're catered to the human resources community. And I only mean that in a professional sense. Not only are we helping the human resources professionals get their recertification credits, we're doing many employment law compliance training at the conference that is meant for just about anyone that is responsible for employees. So that's why I say don't let the letters HR scare you. It's not just geared for people with that designation. We have office professionals come to the conference. And as we move closer to helping more and more of the small business and the office professionals and frontline supervisors, we have 2 new specialty courses. So this year, the regular HR conference is May 7th through the 10th, but if you turn over, we have specialty courses for people that are brand new to HR. So a lot of companies are growing and they're in that shock mode of saying, "Oh my goodness, I need that HR type person here now." We have a 2-day specialty program for basic training for HR. And our people like Peter Lowe that speaks on employment law issues, often they're saying, you need to get this back to your frontline managers and supervisors. It's almost like a broken record. So we're now doing a 1-day specialty program for you to bring your frontline managers and supervisors for a day to hear from employment law specialists and also recruitment and retention specialists to give them a quickie on those basic need to know compliance issues. So I'm happy to be here. We're happy to support this program. This ties into what we talk about with HR issues. So it's kind of
And
a
you're happy to
no-brainer.
give away one of
Oh, yes, and our giveaway. Also, I want to recognize Hudson University, their sponsor. Key Bank is a sponsor. Maine Biz is a sponsor. So again, that overlap is great. And thank you for all the training you do, because we're here all together to try to make Maine great and employers in the state great. So our giveaway is, if you put your card in, you get to choose one of these specialty programs to send someone for free. If you can't do it this year, it can transfer to next year. So, great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, and now I will pass the clicker. I think we're gonna go to you.
Me?
Yes,
Okay. Should I come up and?
if you like, or whatever.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Wolak. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Wolak Group, and just want to take a minute to kind of explain what the Wolak Group is. We are a family-owned business based out of Falmouth, Maine. I'm the second generation. My father started the company back in 1975. Best way to describe it is we own a lot of Dunkin' Donuts. We are not Dunkin' Donuts, but we own a lot of franchises of Dunkin' Donuts. We also do a lot of commercial real estate development within Maine, New Hampshire, and upstate New York. So I joined, well, I always joke that I was born in a Dunkin' Donuts. I literally grew up in the business when my father had two, and now we are encroaching on 101. We have 2,189 employees as of today. And I think to come up after Heather, we always joke that HR is part of everybody's job description now. Even just 10 years ago when I rejoined the company in an executive fashion, HR was not what it is today. And HR has become part of everybody's job. I was also speaking with Steve earlier that we are working on changing our corporate structure to a more decentralized management structure. That being said, because we need to be able to adapt and respond to crisis on a more regular basis. It can happen at any time to anyone. It doesn't matter how big your business is. It can happen to anyone. Viral concerns are real. So just to kind of start off, I actually approached Catherine after this happened. And I said, boy, did I learn a lot here. And being part of the board, which I absolutely love the board of the IFOB, I've learned so much just from being surrounded with such great professionals in the state of Maine. I said, I actually feel like I've got something to offer here. I went through a huge transformation during this, and I realized also what an amazing organization we have. So with that, I don't know if I want to turn it, do you want
I'm going to do the video.
Or should I go ahead and start? Okay, so we have 3 quick videos that I wanted to start with. The first one obviously is what started it all. And I'm going to kind of start by prefacing that I started getting messages and phone calls, text messages, phone calls, and emails as early as 2:30 in the morning this day. When I opened up my phone, it was about 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning because it just wouldn't stop making noises. I got a message from an area manager in New York that said, hey, just so you know, this apparently was posted last night after shift was closed. I took a look at the video, kind of was like, wow, that's really, really awful. And then after I really absorbed what was in the video and the way that it was shared, I realized that this was not going to be a normal day for me. So we'll go ahead and show the first video first.
Hold on.
You're taking us to interesting places.
Yes, I am. All right. We're not
Of
gonna.
course, it all worked this morning.
It did.
Smooth and wet.
Yeah.
You see? No, I tell you I'm sleeping. How many times did I tell you to stop sleeping in here, my nigga? You hear all day, you have enough time, man. How many times the customers and the people gonna tell you to stop sleeping in here? No, that was an accident, bro. You know I'm not playing with you. I ain't gonna call the cops for you like I said. No, you're gonna get out of here. This poor ground water, I'm gonna get shot up. Oh, God.
I don't want you to go.
I don't wanna watch it.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
So that was what I was first faced with. And do we want to take a moment? Okay.
Yeah, so as you're sitting there, if your phone was ringing at 2:30 in the morning and this is all you knew right now was this video was out there in social media, I just want you to think through for the next couple of minutes, how did that video make you feel, both emotionally, think about physically what was going on as you were reading it or listening to it, and then what do you think the next step should be for yourself, and how would you have handled it? And then we're going to talk more in today's session about what your worst case scenario is, but just, take a minute and jot down some of your own personal reflections on the video and some of these questions, and we're going to revisit this later in the program, but let's just take 2 minutes.
It makes me feel a little bit better about myself. All right. So the next video, I won't really go into yet what my response was or what I did, but the next video was spurred off of the first video. It is a local activist in the Syracuse area. He's an activist for the homeless and very well known in the community. He also has a very successful volunteer avenue for the homeless that's called Sandwich Saturdays. So he's a pretty big social figure in the Syracuse area, particularly on social media. So this was his response that morning when we opened at that location.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct, but it's...
There you go. Was the manager in today?
Here yet? She will be.
She's not here?
Not at the moment, not yet.
You know what time she'll be here?
She should be here shortly. Give her a call. It's important.
Yeah, it's very, very important.
Give me 1 second, I'll give her a call. She's supposed to be at like 8.
Let me ask y'all a question. How do you feel about when your employees disrespect one of my homeless friends?
Sir, we saw the video. No, just the issue, but we don't know.
Okay.
We saw the video for it.
Okay, no problem at all. I'm not blaming you guys.
Yeah, we know as much as you guys, we don't feel that it was right at all.
Okay.
So hopefully, they'll take the right step away.
I don't know if you guys know who I am. Okay, that's good. I don't know if you guys know who I am. I'm an advocate. I'm very known in the Syracuse area. I'm an advocate for the homeless. And I need to find out what's going on with the young man that disrespected the man here and what's the actions been taken. And I understand that the manager needs to come now because I have massive people who's going to support me to boycott the store. Massive people. You can look me up. You can look me up. I understand that, but I need to talk to the manager as soon as possible. And if that manager, I understand that. I just need to talk to him. That's all I need to do. Cause I understand that. So we make the right decision. What happened to the man yesterday? Everybody will be happy. She's not answering. Okay, there's no problem with that. I'm gonna leave you my card.
Yes, please. I'll give you a call. Don't worry, welcome to Dunkin' Donuts. Next week, would you like to try to order a donut today?
Well, my name is Alamir Muhammad. I'm the founder of We Rise Above the Street. I'm the advocate for the homeless community in Syracuse. I'm very known. If she doesn't contact me by noon, I'm sorry. We got to boycott this place as soon as possible.
Yeah, no,
all right, thank you. How you doing? How you doing? All right.
So the protest started a lot earlier than noon. We didn't have until noon before protesters showed up. So for the third video, I thought was interesting for a couple different reasons. So in general, people wait for the media to tell them what happened, the story, but I will tell you that the stories that came out of this throughout the media were just peppered with non-facts. It was, and this video in particular is really interesting to me because, and I'll let you see the quick, he's a very well-known social media speaker, and I'll tell you after what was actually untrue.
YouTube is great for people that are just starting a new business or small business owners like myself.
Stop, you beautiful bastards. Hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday Tuesday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is the controversy and backlash against Dunkin' Donuts, which I'm going to keep calling Dunkin' Donuts. I know they're doing the whole name change where it's just Dunkin'. The name change doesn't matter, but it's just too new and weird. It feels like when I'm saying it that I'm talking about a guy named Dunkin', not a donut establishment. But that said, the reason we're talking about them is what happened at a Syracuse Dunkin' Donuts over the weekend. On Sunday, there was a video posted where a Syracuse Dunkin' Donuts employee was seen dumping a pitcher of water onto a man with his head down who has now been identified as Jeremy Dufresne. And to start things off, I'll just let you watch the video.
You want to see? How many times I gotta tell you to stop sleeping in here, man? You hear all day, you have enough time, man. How many times the customers and the people gonna tell you to stop sleeping in here? No, that was an accident, bro. You know I'm not playing with you. I ain't gonna call the cops for you like I said, Mo. You gonna get out of here.
So the video was taken, put online, it ends up going viral, garnering over 42,000 shares on Facebook. Following that, there were calls for a boycott of the store, for the employees to be fired. On Monday, you had Al-Amin Mohammed, who runs the homeless outreach We Rise Above the Streets, confronting the store manager and leading a protest of around 20 people. Some holding signs reading "Homeless Lives Matter," "Homeless are human." We also saw the owner of the Dunkin' Donuts franchise, Kimberly Wolak, saying in a statement, "We were extremely disturbed by the behavior of our employees captured in the video. It not only violated our written policies, but goes against our core values as an organization, which include creating a welcoming and hospitable environment and treating everyone with dignity and respect. The employees involved in the incident have been terminated, and we will be contacting the individual in the video to apologize for the negative experience." And regarding that victim, we've learned more about him since the video was posted. Reportedly, Dufresne sleeps outside most nights and has schizophrenia. Also, as far as why he was there, he said that he sometimes goes to Dunkin' Donuts to charge his phone in order to call his mother, which he does every night. And he said on the night that the video was taken, he wasn't sleeping, he just had his head down on his hands while he was waiting for his phone to charge. And he also said he was surprised when the employee poured water on him, since they usually treated him kindly, sometimes even giving him food and drinks. And regarding the worker that did this to him, Dufresne said he probably had some personal problems of his own and needed someone to talk to, and he took it out on someone else, like me. Additionally, with this situation, we saw a GoFundMe started for Dufresne. It appears to have been started by the same person that posted the video. It has quickly surpassed its $150 goal, and as of recording this video, it has passed $12,000. So at the very least, it appears that we have this kind of good silver lining to an otherwise shitty situation. Well, like the good and the bad that the internet can provide, I'm happy the good that was provided here. Because really, without this video and the internet, it's just another day where a shitty person did a shitty thing to someone that was down on their luck. And especially with homeless people, there are a lot of people that don't even look at them as people. And so it's nice to see from this story spreading that humanity hasn't been lost and people reached out to help. And then let's talk about why since Saturday night, Ariana Grande and Pete Davidson have been in the news. If you don't know, the comedian and the singer are currently engaged.
And just to kind of relay, there was about 50,000 shares that I know of. It was international, it went global, 1 billion impressions online. So within 2 weeks, everybody's life within our organization was completely changed by this. But I mean, everything from obviously false accusations to, real fair reactions to death threats, multiple. Somehow people got a hold of my personal information, was calling my cell phone, as well as other people within the organization as well, anybody that they could get a hold of. But I think what also, we have to keep in mind is that just because I am a local family-owned business in Maine, I'm representing a national, international brand. And that is really what I think took this to a whole other level. Yeah. Just happened to be a week after they announced the name change, by the way. So they're already in the news, as he had said. The interesting thing with that video is when he speaks a little bit about Al-Amin Mohammed and he shows this picture, that's not even him. That's not him. So it was to me, that was the most shocking part. I'm like, that's not, and I had to go back and look, and that was not even a real picture of Al-Amin Mohammed. So I just kind of want that to sink in a little bit when you're listening to these videos and you're reading these news stories, how much of it truly is vetted. In a lot of stories, it was mentioned that he was a manager. He was not a manager. He was a crew member. He actually had a personal relationship with Mr. Dufresne. he would leave him food every night outside. He had helped him multiple times on other occasions trying to get help. Dufresne actually preferred to sleep outside. He did not want the help. So, and actually, for all intents and purposes, a week earlier, he had been taken out by the law enforcement because he is schizophrenic. So there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes. There were actually 3 employees involved, not just the 2. There was another video taken by another employee from behind the counter. 2 that you see within the video were African American. The one behind the counter that was maybe not quite as involved, but also involved, was Caucasian. These people do not have transportation. So we had to try to coordinate that morning to get in touch with everybody and be able to meet with them in person, which was also problematic and hard. So I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Kim, I'm just curious, who took the video initially? The first video?
The other employee that was was laughing on the side.
That was his video? Yeah. And how did it go, how did it get out there? Did they post it?
He posted it on his Facebook page.
Okay.
And then it got shared from there. And I don't completely quote me on this, but he literally had that up and then taken down, I was told, within an hour. It had just grown within that hour so quickly that it was already out there.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're going to go back to those questions a little bit. So who wants to share a little bit? How did you feel about that video? What were your emotions?
Anger.
Anger.
How cruel it was.
Shock.
Yeah,
sad.
Sad.
Unsettling.
Unsettling.
It was confusing too.
Yeah, you weren't quite sure what was quite going on. A little confusing. Didn't have all the information. How did you feel physically?
Yeah.
Right to the stomach.
Right to the stomach, yeah.
Yeah, right to the gut.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did any of you feel like frozen?
Frustrated.
Oh, frustrated.
Yeah, it's like, oh God, it's gonna be a long day.
It's gonna be a long day. Yeah, it's gonna be. Well, I think we heard that from Kim.
More training is needed.
Yeah, her day was gonna change. So if that were you,
Well, I wasn't necessarily frozen, but there was some disconnects because the laughter was telling me it was supposed to be funny, but there wasn't anything funny, and so that really I went quickly to anger at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of mixed messages in there. Anyone else?
I actually worked for the Wolak group for 3 years before joining the bank 8 months ago. And I worked for the Main Street location that they just renovated. And we had homeless people sleeping in there all the time. And I could never imagine doing that. At some points, we actually had a couple of employees that were homeless at times. And it's just really disgusting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Okay, so going on to the next thing, what do you think would have been the next step? Okay, obviously you're gonna get up, get dressed, run out of the house.
But I kept thinking, Kim has kids. So I kept thinking of Kim and I'm like, how did you handle that? You know, you can't just run out of the house. You have to think about there's other things you have to figure out and then run out of the house
Yeah. What do you think? Kind of what's the next thing?
Call the supervisor. I'd call down to the store, see what's going on, and then once I got some sort of a conversation, then call whoever my supervisor was.
And make some calls.
I didn't know what time it was when Alameen was in there looking for the manager, but I thought that the manager, the area manager, understanding you got 500 miles between you and the store, so you can't be there. But I was surprised that no management was in the store at that time. So that would have been my next step, is to make sure that the employees and the manager and whoever else was appropriate to be in that store first thing.
Great, thank you. What else?
would have called my PR rep.
Yeah.
All right, as far as how you would handle, we're gonna hold on that one, but start thinking about it, taking notes, because Kim's gonna be sharing with you how she did in fact handle it. But for you, in your company, think about that for a minute. What is your worst case scenario? What could happen?
Truck body falls on somebody in the shop, or truck body falls off a truck on the road, kills somebody.
Yeah, so an accident, yeah, what else? What are some of the what is like the worst thing? Yes.
Tanker rolls over and it happens to go into water.
Yeah, so an environmental issue, yeah.
Ours would be, well, when I was at Planet Dog, it would have been a dog being killed by one of our products. And, you know, that does in fact happen. And we've actually had some similar situations with that where a dog gets, you know, a piece of a toy caught in their intestines and it can kill a dog. So, and people do not react well to that. I'm sure you know, everyone loves their dogs. This is like, you killed my dog. So, yeah.
Anyone else want to share? Yes.
Losing a resident. Recall of product.
Product recall.
Area.
Yeah.
For a lot of us, fundamentally, it comes down to, can the public trust your product or service? So fraud for us would be bad.
Yeah, that would be bad. That would be. So what you're hearing is everyone in this room has a different worst case scenario. And what you're starting to figure out is that this can really happen to anyone. And why do we have difficulties responding? And if you think about it, you had to go through that emotional, all those emotions, all those feelings before you could kind of get to what is my next step? I need to do something. But what is it? And what keeps us from doing that is there are barriers that we need to understand that are keeping us from doing the right next thing. So in our business, as Catherine introduced, I have a public relations firm. And so our job is to come at situations from an outsider's perspective and help minimize and remove these barriers. So according to what Steve was talking about with respect to trust, current trends in social media today involve two things. The number one is all about rebuilding trust with brands, and the second is storifying social, storifying. So finding stories that people are going to latch onto and get excited about and engage with and share. So if there's a story there, people are going to get engaged with it. The second thing, top trends in reputation management. Trust is one of, again, the number one trend that brands are trying to rebuild trust. Also, video is growing exponentially. And more videos are being shared and more stories are being shared. So understanding the barriers is we come to the table and we say, well, you know, it's not going to be that bad. So we tell ourselves, we minimize the situation. It's not going to be that bad. It's all, or we're in denial. Oh my God, that didn't really happen. Or it's going to go away. Okay? You have to be the voice of reason and you have to go to that worst case scenario and you have to feel it. Because that's the only way you're going to get through these barriers to deal with it. Your organizational structure may hinder you from responding. Well, I've never been able to act on my own. I don't have autonomy. I can't make decisions. I need to go to my boss. The organizational structure of the company will hinder appropriate response. Proprietary processes. Well, this is how we do things, or this is the process. We can't really bring anybody under the tent. Dunkin' Donuts is a franchise. It's a formula. You know, they don't want to go out there and start sharing a lot of their different proprietary processes if it was a computer glitch or something along those lines. We have local, state, and federal laws. Those of you that hear about breaches, the Secret Service may actually tell you you can't tell anybody that you've had a breach because they're trying to track it down to Kazakhstan or Russia or wherever they're trying to track it down to. There might be laws, there might be law enforcement that's involved. So you actually can't have a conversation about it, a robbery or a bomb threat or an active shooter. Privacy laws. Peter's going to talk about that with respect to your employees have rights to privacy, your customers have rights to privacy. You can't talk about that. Lack of a plan and training, I'm going to talk about that later. And then of course, and not to diss on Peter, but our lawyers will talk to us and sometimes not give the best advice. And so we all have to work together to have an effective response. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter. And he'll share with you some of the legal and HR.
To give you the best advice.
Yes.
The very best of advice. Just a little bit of background, and I know some of you. The areas I practice in primarily are working with businesses on employment law issues, and in the public sector, a lot of school departments, municipalities, employment and other issues. And sadly, we don't get called into a situation when things are going well. I always say, no one calls me out to say, hey, Heather deserves a raise. Of course, Heather does deserve a raise. Is it okay if I give Heather the raise? We get called in these crisis situations, and it was interesting to hear you go around the room and sort of your worst case. Representing schools, I've dealt with 2 fatalities on field trips. One overseas, a student sleptwalked out of his Paris hotel, right out of the window, and sadly died. And another disabled student on a field trip just near Augusta fell, hit her head, and died. Last night was at a board meeting, and I'm not disclosing a client conference because it was in the paper, with a school district that's dealing with a racial harassment situation. Those harassment situations in the employment world can just explode on you. I think of Dunkin' Donuts and any retail outlet. The issue now of discrimination, harassment, in particular profiling of customers is a very, very real one. We all saw what happened to Starbucks. I think it was in the Pennsylvania area, and how that became such a massive issue. I not so long ago dealt with a town manager client with the town who was charged with stealing parking money and embezzlement. And whether it's in the public or private sector, the thing just can threaten to engulf you when it happens. And my experience is you can't be too small or too large for it to happen to you. I worked for many, many years with a fine company in Freeport named LL Bean that most of us are familiar with. And when I talk to LL Bean folks, I do a lot of training with them. And I always emphasize to them, I say, where I see my role is helping you protect what is your most valuable asset. And LL Bean does, it's a big company. It has a lot of assets that have a value that you could assign to them, buildings and all the rest. But their most valuable asset, I probably should be saying it's the employees, but in fact it is their reputation. That's the item that is of most value to them. And if you're an organization that has built over 100 years a reputation that is sterling, people love to pull you down from that pedestal. They really do. And so the higher you go, the faster you can fall. So organizations, being one of them, have to be prepared for the worst. And one of the things that I've worked with them closely on is they run some of you may have participated, they run outdoor discovery schools, which are all their outdoor programs. I forget how many people go through those each year, but it's a large number. It's in all sorts of states. We can talk about this a little bit more further on, but they plan, of course, for the worst to happen on one of those programs. And plainly, if something terrible were to happen, how they deal with it, how they communicate, how they deal with the liability issues, all those other things is going to have an implication on their name and their reputation. And of course, a company of that size has the resources to do that planning. And I realize everybody has different scales and resources. Let me just in a few minutes, just talk about one of the key issues that I see. So when I get that phone call, and when you get that phone call, you recognize in your client's voice, that they are in a crisis mode and they're looking wherever they can for help. And I obviously share the legal perspective, but you cannot, and Linda's point's a good one, you cannot give legal advice in a vacuum and immediately be focused on, oh, will we be sued? Because if you do that, you will lose on so many other fronts, particularly in the public relations front. It always puzzles me, and I guess I understand why, but when I look at a response from an organization, corporation, public sector, when they simply say we have no response, and they're sort of they're cowering under the table at that point, and I understand why, but people will fill that vacuum immediately. And if the lawyers are giving that advice that don't say anything, then that is bad advice. But you have a very short time frame to respond, and Kim can talk about that more, but plainly, the guy walks in the store, her phone is exploding, before, the media are going to be all over this one. And it used to be, it's going to be published by 4 o'clock. We have to put it to the printing press. Remember that? Sounds quaint. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. Just as an illustrated point, I was at that meeting last night, and there was someone from the Portland paper there, and I thought, I wonder how quickly it'll take. She was still there for it to go online, and I just checked my phone. I wasn't driving, I swear. I'd stopped the gas, and there it was. She must have sat in the meeting and posted the article, and there it was right away. Fortunately, no photos. But you need, in order to be able to respond, you need facts. And you've got to be really, really cautious, though, because if you get out too early, too soon, and you get it wrong, then your credibility is in real trouble. And you've compounded your problem. All right, we've got a big problem. Somebody did an awful thing to a homeless person, and then we came out, and I'm not saying Kim did, it looks like they handled it incredibly well. I thought that statement sounded great. But if you get it wrong early on, then you really, you've shot yourself in the foot. Yes.
What's wrong with going too far on the side of, doing what's right and just saying, we were wrong and we're going to do everything we can to fix it?
Yeah.
If that's not justified, what's wrong with going that route?
Yeah, I would lean, and it doesn't sound like a lot, I always lean to going to that place early and as soon as you can. But you have to understand that if you go too far too early, and in fact the facts don't support it, you may have admitted culpability when you don't have it. And frankly, fatality is a really good example. The devil does lie in the details. And this example was a good one in that we all saw what we thought we saw, but there were other employees involved. Who was taping it? Why were they taping it? Was there somebody else taping it? So if we came out right away and said something that immediately, let's say immediately we said they're all going to be terminated, even before we communicated or made that decision, I think we go out too far. You have to be driven, though, by the speed of how these things happen. And the apology, I'm a lawyer who actually believes that clients should apologize, and should apologize sincerely, and not just apologize for, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's like the diluted apology. And I'll share one example. This did happen. Again, it was public, but I think it's a good illustration. It's probably about 5 years ago now. LL Bean terminated 4 employees, and they worked in the call center. And I first learned about it from the Director of Public Affairs, who said, have you read the paper? And I said, no, but it's never good when the Director of Public Affairs says that. And there it was. There was a story in the paper about, these employees and how unfair it was. And long story short, but Bean reached out immediately to those folks, said to them, we have a fair treatment process. We want you to go through it. What you're trying to do is disconnect from lawyers. You want to be in contact with that person right away. They did, and they went through it, and all 4 were reinstated. And the chief operations officer at the time, and a guy by the name of Bob, showed a great credibility, got out front, issued a personal apology to all of them, sent an apology around the company, and said, we made a mistake. And when we make a mistake, we recognize it. The risk you have in those situations is, oh gosh, they're going to sue us. Let's batten down the hatches. Let's say the things they did wrong. Let's be defensive, and then you're in the wrong place. So certainly there's a place for an apology. The other thing I want to emphasize, and I think it's a really important part of an initial response, there are longer term things. You really do want to think about your internal communications when a crisis like this happens. Because if you are sending emails everywhere, you're texting everywhere, let's use a fatality example. Words count, and people use words and say things that later lawyers who are going to sue you put under this incredible microscope and make you look bad. And where I've been involved in these crises, people should talk, people should have conference calls, people should meet. The less that's flowing back and forth in all these written communications from a lawyer's perspective, you want to really minimize that. Think about streamlining your communications. We're better and we're more effective when we talk anyway than when we're doing it all through our devices. And the last thing I want to mention is your ability, the importance of reaching the person who, I'm going to use the word victim, or the complainant, the person who's raised that issue, is really, really important. The longer you delay that, the longer because you're frozen, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to do it, but reach out to that person or that person's family in the very, very tragic sense of a case of a fatality, and make that initial communication. It is really, really valuable. The situations where people feel they didn't even get hold of me, they didn't even contact me, they didn't even try to find me. I'm dealing with another client right now who's come up with a whole process for dealing with customers who come in and complain about their experience in a store. And my anecdotal experience is customers are much more likely now to raise a discrimination allegation than they were. And I think it's the world we live in, the awareness, all those other things. So I've been part of setting up a protocol where that customer won't get a generic phone call, won't get an email, won't get, we're sorry, here, take this gift certificate. They'll get, a real life person who will call them as soon as humanly possible to say, please tell me about your experience. I see that you posted something online. I see that you sent an email. You told the manager. You yelled at somebody in the store. So yell. Tell us about your experience, and we'll look into that, and we'll respond to you. And we'll tell you, and if it was a negative experience, we're certainly going to hold people accountable and apologize. Anyway, those are a few just sort of pointers, and there's lots more on this topic, and great to hear from some of the other experts.
really helpful to hear you guys kind of speaking, because I feel like, I was so on that same page that day, and that is a testament to the amazing people that I have, that I was so lucky to have in my organization that day. So just to kind of go through a little bit, not good. So when I actually got that phone call, well, when I first started seeing everything, my first inclination, because I'm here in Maine, and this happened in downtown Syracuse, I needed to get a hold of what I call my boots on the ground. I needed to get a hold of my operations teams, figure out what their plan was, were they even aware of it? My first email actually came from an area manager that doesn't even oversee this area first. So he notified me first thing, and then I had to get a hold of the other area manager and the director, just to make sure that they were aware. We've all learned a lot from this, and even in hindsight, looking back, the director of this location actually was made aware of this the night before, and she felt awful because she didn't believe that it would turn into this. We deal with situations every day in our business. We have a lot of employee relations issues, behavior issues that we're constantly trying to educate and honestly control for the betterment of either the brand or even just the workforce and for the areas that we are expecting people to work in. That day, there was so much noise. As Lindsay brought up, I have 2 children at home, and that morning I was peppered with so much noise between public response, the brand, Dunkin Corporate, calling me from Canton. I had all of my operations people calling me. I had my lawyers calling me. I had the media calling me, emailing me, everything. So my first reaction when I watched that video was, and just, for all intents and purposes, since you guys shared your emotion, was anger. I was so angry when I watched this video. As one of the leaders of this company, second generation leader, we have been working so hard on culture in our organization. It is a tough uphill battle. It's a tough industry to work on culture, and it is my mission to make sure that we try to make this company as best as we possibly can in terms of culture and behavior. We've we created the mission statement, the core values. We've harped on those things. We've reformatted job descriptions and everyday performance reviews to try to mimic those core values and those mission statements. But to get that all the way down to the store level where those crew members are actually experiencing what we are expecting from the top is extremely difficult. So, to see an employee treating a customer like this, which, purely our mission statement is customer service, to see this was appalling. And I took it personally. So to take the emotion out of this was really hard for me. So I knew the very first thing I needed to do was check the emotion out the door. I had to put the ego aside and be able to reach out to every single person I could think of that could help manage the situation. I contacted, after I contacted my operations, because that day the manager of the store had a day off. That was his day off, her day off, sorry. So the assistant manager was there, but the manager was not. Again, hard to believe from the video where you're just like, well, where's the that was the assistant, because the manager had the day off.
Kim, did the manager know?
The manager was made aware that morning.
Oh, that morning, okay.
Yeah. And the very first thing in making contact with the director, I called everybody because, again, I'm lucky to have this organizational structure, but I do have a franchise partner in that area, which I think is integral to being able to have true ownership of that area and have that passion to make sure that your business is succeeding is having a partial partner in that area. We had a chief of staff, we have 2 directors, we have multiple area managers. When I made that call to that director, everybody was en route to that store. So before 8 o'clock in the morning, I think I had 3 area managers, both directors, the other franchise owner, the chief of staff, everybody in that store, to be able to manage what was happening and the pressure that was being put on my crew members by the public. You know, I see that video of Al-Amin, which obviously is hard to watch as well, but you know, how hard those crew members were trying to just do their job.
Right, yeah, right.
You know, and so that to me, it was like, really, we needed to bring the humanity back to the situation and understand that people were trying to do their job. They're trying not to let this affect them, but it was affecting everyone. So another thing that was really important to know was that I had a pressured deadline from the media to respond by noon. After getting my kids off to school, being on the phone the whole time, which obviously has its mom guilt associated to it, I had to understand who were the employees involved, how long have they been with us, how much training have they been involved. Ironically, a week before, we sent out a memo about customer service and how important it was to treat our customers with respect, that they were expected to sign individually, but it didn't happen. So, you know, did they see the memo? Did they, you know, all of these things, and it was very much of a legal issue. 2 of the employees were African American, 1 was Caucasian. They were all male. Did they know each other? Did they not? You know, was there a history there? Was there behavioral problems? Everything was based on, I needed to know the facts, because as long as I have been in this business, everything is never at face value. You can peel back that onion and peel back that onion and realize that there is so much more to this story that the media could never even take the time to write about. It's more important to get it out there.
That's right.
So to be able to do my due diligence as an employer, I needed to get a hold of every single one of those employees, make sure that we heard their side of the story. I know a lot of the public was like, well, why do you need to hear their side of the story? Look what he did.
Yeah.
That's absolutely ridiculous. Well, listen, I agree to a certain degree. I would never dump water on anybody, not even a boyfriend I was mad at. And maybe other things, but I would. But the point being, though, is that, you know, I couldn't even relate to this person.
Yeah.
So I needed to get the facts. And also, and I know this, they may have crossed some of your mind, was this staged?
Yeah.
Was this an angry employee that maybe didn't get the raise that they wanted and staged this whole thing? Because I did start to realize that these 2 knew each other for quite some time. Anyway, from there on, it was all about damage control at the beginning. It was really important for me to stay in contact with the corporate brand in my particular situation. They were all over me. They needed to know how I was responding, what I was going to say. They wanted to see it first.
Did they provide any help? Did they give you,
Right.
not just checking in, but they saying, here's
Yes.
our resources?
Oh, they're always willing to. They'll give me guidance to the end of the franchise disclosure document, and then.
Yeah.
So, but in all honesty, and I do say this from the bottom of my heart, Dunkin is a wonderful brand from a corporate side. They are very good to their franchise owners, and they provide a whole lot of assistance whenever you ask for it. And particularly with this, I was lucky enough that I knew a lot of the high ups in Dunkin corporate media. So, you know, by calling these people, they were right on it. They were very gracious. I just come from a Dunkin conference the week before where I was speaking about brand management within a brand. So I had just spoken with them a week earlier and then come home to this. And so I was lucky that it was really truly about the relationships that we had. But, you know, we reached out to everybody. We reached out to local law enforcement, which it's so important for your businesses to have a very good relationship with your law enforcement community around you. Obviously, Dunkin's always had a reputation with, you know, police officers. My boyfriend's actually a cop, ironically, which is kind of a funny side note. But it is important to have that when things get rough. And, you know, when I had Al-Amin, who has, you know, Al-Amin has a huge heart. This man has dedicated his life to advocating for homeless. So I wasn't even angry at him, and even honestly afterwards when he met with us that day, later that day after this meeting, after the protest ended. He actually apologized to us for reacting the way he did. He's like, I woke up, I saw that video, I got so mad, I just headed straight there. You know, and that's how everybody wants to react. And that's why you have to stop and try to get the facts. But, you know, we have continued to have a great relationship with him moving forward. But, you know, we reached out to the charities that we do work with, honestly, to help us manage the situation in terms of protests, for people to kind of come out and say, listen, like, we know this is a horrible situation, but this business has given thousands of dollars to the local community here. Like, just, you know, something, don't boycott the store. And honestly, that was more in protecting of the employees. You know, we needed to protect our employees from the reality of the situation. By noon, I had multiple death threats. I mean, literally death threats, as if I had dumped the water myself over this man. And it was never a question within the company, regardless of what lawyer was telling me what, we were going to reach out to Mr. Brann. We would find a way. He was the hardest one to get a hold of. He didn't want to be in the limelight. He didn't want this publicity, and clearly he didn't want this to happen to him. But in the end, even after the fact, which we were able to facilitate through an advocacy group that knew him, to meet with him and apologize in person, that he was the hardest one to get hold of. It took probably, because my HR team was so amazing that day, we were able to get all 3 employees, we were able to get them to pick up the phone. We were able to get them to the office to meet with them, which the majority of them didn't have their own transportation, so we coordinated that. We had spoken with, and we had made determinations by, I'm gonna say, 2:00 in the afternoon. But that wasn't soon enough for the media to make their statement. So by noon, I had to make the statement that I had made, which was that we were doing our due diligence, and that they would be handled appropriately. Because I could not make, even though I knew that they were going to be terminated, I needed to have a solid statement based on facts before I released that to media, or I was gonna have an even bigger problem later. That's kind of the skinny of the actual day that went at hand. Obviously, that operational coverage that I had lasted for weeks after. And like even by later that morning, I had corporate brand representation in the store as well. So, you know, by midday, there was so much coverage in terms of, you know, what to say, how to handle, make sure customers that were there had their questions answered, but also had the service that they were expecting, even if they didn't know what was going on.
Seems like you have, is it possible you have too much advice? A lot of people chirping at you.
You know, and you know, the ironic thing, and again, like, you know, I laughed when I was listening to Peter. I have tremendous legal team, but by midday, I was actually advised to not terminate until tomorrow, and I said no. I absolutely said, you know, we know we're going to terminate, so I made the call, we're going to terminate. We need to get back a hold of all 3 employees at this point and terminate. And that needed to happen that day in order to see things start to dissipate, you know. The brand was always like, oh, this too shall pass. I'm like, okay, you know, because it took months for the death threats to stop. And it, I always wonder, you know, if I went a full 24 hours, how the media would have treated me if I still hadn't actually made the statement that those employees were terminated. Because by 5 o'clock that day, I had them rewrite the statement that said that they have been officially terminated. But it was tough to get all of that done within a day. People don't realize how much due diligence takes. Oh my gosh.
I'm just curious, what was the impact to the business from a financial standpoint? I mean, did sales drop? Like, what happened?
Sales and customer counts dropped, but I will tell you, not for long.
Okay, yeah, I wondered how long.
So, you know, in relevance to the situation, I would say that the customer counts and the sales were more affected by the noise around that location. People were just like, oh, I'll just go somewhere else. Or, you know, I did have a lot of people that said, I will never go to any one of your locations ever again, you know, and you know, I had a lot of people question, why in the world would you hire someone like that? And, you know, how dare you hire someone like that? What planet are you on?
Yeah.
You know, and up until that situation, I had no disciplinary issues with this employee, not one. And it is North Salina, as I call it, is the name of the location, is in a very tough part of Syracuse. It is probably one of the toughest locations that I have. So in terms of turnover, I have a lot in that location. It's been always a struggle to keep people for a long period of time. And so there was a lot of focus on that location. And it didn't stop this from happening.
Yeah.
Did you ever find out why he said he did what he did?
Right, his version.
His version.
I thought it was fun.
That's funny.
Yeah. If you do some of your own Googling, he did issue an apology, a public apology via YouTube. He actually did ask for his job back too. So, you know, and that again, you know, I had the public reaching out to me, some people saying, you know, why wouldn't you rehire this person? Like he's trying to redeem himself, and I'm just it was the classic, like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like it absolutely, I could not have pleased everybody in this situation.
Kim, how did you deal with the death threats?
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
So this was the hardest part. You know, because of the family, my devotion to my father's legacy, and honestly, the devotion to what I am trying to do with this company and changing the culture, which is absolutely my 100% passion, is trying to change how we do business. So something like this was in hearing the false accusations and just people's assumptions of who you are and what you do or what you've done, and you know, I heard it all that day, or for weeks after. I didn't sleep much at all. There was a lot of emotional up and down, and I think, you know, people go through a lot worse in life than this, and I had to kind of reflect on that and just say, like, this is a scratch to what some people have to deal with in life. I'm lucky and I'm privileged to be in the position that I'm in. I needed to dig deep in myself and say, I need to use this as a motivator and a vehicle for better, for change, to be able to learn something, to be able to give back, because, and I hope that nobody is completely offended by me saying this, but when you see a tragic event happen, that's when you see people come together. Okay, so, you know, I always think of September 11th, right? It was such a tragic day. A lot of people remember exactly where they were and what they were doing at that moment. But also just the way that this country came together after that is, and I kept thinking, when this happened, I always think, oh, we've got all these employee issues and we have all this broken communication and we could do this better and this better and this better. But during that moment, when I made those first phone calls early in the morning, I had so much devotion and people trying to protect what they did for, their careers, their livelihood. That was just as important to them as protecting this company was to me that day. So that's what kept me going. If that's like the long, probably a long answer to your question. But yeah, there was a lot of tears.
I mean, how did you, I immediately think of, would somebody actually carry through these efforts? Like, how did you handle that aspect, making sure you and your family were safe? I mean, yes. Or, you've got. I know it's wonderful, but I mean, really, how did you have to involve the law enforcement?
I made sure I set my alarm that night.
Yeah.
So, there was only so much I could do.
Right.
I had to believe that it was empty threats for the most part. But in terms of on the ground, North Salina and our other locations, when I said I contacted law enforcement in multiple areas to just say like, hey, really, I'd love it if your patrolman could hang out, get some coffee, whatever, just because it was really important that employee safety was paramount in my eyes. I was not the only one that was being affected by it. Honestly, the people that had to go in that store that day and live that life face to face, they were the ones that had it hard.
Yeah.
I was the one behind the phone, surrounded in offices, by the noise, but I wasn't face to face dealing with these people.
Did you have to go to New York, or did you go to New York and
No, I didn't. No, I had my franchise partner and but the next week I was there.
Yeah.
Kim, you had mentioned that you had some memos that went to the stores to people sign for processes. I'm curious, did you change any processes or have in-store training after this event to kind of help you for the future?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think I'll probably touch a little bit on that later with my brand management and what kind of came out of this for the organization. But yes, we did, and that all stemmed from the relationships that we had started because of this. So there was a lot of advocacy groups that we reached out to after this event and saying, what can we do to help, and prove that, we are always looking for ways to get involved in the community. To me, I just feel like this was something that was just thrown in our face saying, hello, you need to be part of the solution, not the problem. So one of the people that we reached out to was John Tamina, who has In My Father's Kitchen, and it's also an advocacy group, but he also does education, and he came into we have a couple different facilities where we try to bring all of our management together in the Syracuse area, and we do, above store leadership classes and all kinds of stuff. But we brought him in, and he actually spoke about just the culture and how we can be more aware and how we can reach out and help. And then we established a relationship with CNY 211, which is a crisis hotline. And that's actually been utilized multiple times since this issue. As early as recent as last week, we had an employee that was suicidal. And it was because of that hotline that he chose not to take his life.
So obviously this was a very viral incident, and it seems like it was isolated, but I think one of the challenges to an initial response is saying, this is the first time anything like this has happened to us, only to put yourself in a corner when somebody has another situation they can point to say, well, no, it's not, look at this, and why didn't that inform your future reaction? Was there sort of, did that run through your mind at all in this process and thinking, oh my goodness, is there another situation somebody might be able to point to and sort of scrutinize our reaction to this? I guess I say that as a question, but also a comment for the room. That's always a consideration.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Dunkin is no stranger to social media viral videos.
Sure.
You know, and it's unfortunate. And I did mention to Catherine that, you know, for those that aren't aware, you know, Dunkin is a franchise brand versus like Starbucks, which is a corporate brand. So franchise brand has a bunch of little owners that own multiple or just a couple Dunkin' Donuts throughout the country. Starbucks is owned by one corporation. So when you've got something like what this gentleman's saying, you know, a video or a situation that's happened at one Dunkin' could be someone completely different that runs their franchise completely different. So yes, there's always something that when I had heard that there was a second video. I saw the second video taken from behind the counter. So there was more, but I mean, it showed the same thing. But there are employees that carry their phones around all day long and are filming things all the time. So, you know, again, I'm not one to say that everything is perfect, but I will absolutely attest to that I do my absolute best to try to make sure that I run an organization that runs on integrity. So if and when I do see there's things are brought to my attention that does not face what we hold as a corporate company, I am not afraid to call a spade a spade. There was never one opportunity in this whole incident that said that I was not eventually going to make sure I did the right thing. But the right thing to me may not be the right thing to everybody else.
What did the communication with your dad look like? And he must be so proud of how you handled the situation.
So my father, he is very proud of how the organization and how I think we handled this. Again, you know, we are one of a team of teams, so I am not going to take all the credit for this. I had a great team. He, I think maybe did not know that this was not nearly what it was going to turn out to be. I did have multiple conversations with him that morning. He was not in the office. And I think based on the beginning side of it, he was not aware that this was where it was headed, even though his, you know, the younger one was saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And
he's trying to calm you down.
Yeah, he's just like, "Oh, it's all right, you know, I'll be in later." And I'm just like, "No." Yeah. But I mean, he absolutely, you know, sees what has come of it, and you know, also is proud of the things that we've done since.
I had two things. The first was just a comment. When the gentleman was interviewing the staff that was there, you know, you had the one guy made the bad decision with the pitcher and the rest of them, but they handled them really well. They were very polite, very respectful. They didn't push them off. They tried to get the manager. So the training's working somewhere.
Right.
Beyond the social media piece, how long did it take for the media bomb to go off and then they moved on to something else? The short attention span nature of it.
Yeah, I would say 3 weeks. It was pretty intense for 3 weeks. You know, and ironically, just even last week, I got another email from someone saying, you know, "I hope you terminate that employee," and I'm just like, "What? Wait, what? What happened?
Where have you been?"
So, you know, it resonates, and people see the video for the first time.
Right.
You know, that's the love of social media, but yeah, I would say it was super intense for about 3 weeks.
So I think obviously that was horrible. I think the other thing that I feel sometimes happens is the video gets put out there from one perspective. So in this case, it was your employees. But in some cases, it's some bystander who takes a snippet of what actually occurred, and that's what gets put all over you know, social media. So you know, in your case, the investigation was probably pretty close to what you actually saw in the video. But you know, maybe it's a little bit of a question for how do you handle it when the video that's out there is not necessarily 100% of what happened? And how do you, you know, you've got that vision in everyone's head now, and you're now trying to change the story a little bit. What changes in that scenario in terms of how to handle it?
I mean, I can say I know that the video has been tweaked and edited and added and all kinds of stuff has happened in this video since then. Even like quotes that I didn't say are, you know, are posted on there and you're like, I did not say that. You know, but.
Yeah, I can give you actually a fairly concrete example. I don't think I have an easy answer because I think it's so tough, but one of my clients recently had a customer who videoed a person, what they believe was the store manager, and the store manager putting them under surveillance. And so that, not to the extent yours did, but it went sort of semi-viral.
Yeah.
And immediately the narrative was racial profiling because it was a mixed race couple. And in fact, the assistant store manager and another employee had overheard these two talking about stealing something. But once you get into those details and you start to sort of share that type of information, you sort of sink into the morass.
Right.
So you get this initial hit or story that says racial profiling. And then if you try to like address it, then the next story is, remember that racial profiling at X store? Well, they're now denying it and they're saying this. And then there's another response to that. So it's really, really difficult to sort of get into the, and the biggest frustration that my clients have frequently in these situations is, particularly in the public sector where there's so much confidentiality around employee information that you cannot respond. You can't get out there. You wish you could just stand up and say, look, here is the real story. Let me tell you the real story. The thing that I've often counseled clients on in these situations when they are muzzled in that way is still to say something, try to get out and say, I can't discuss the details with you. I'm going to respect this person's confidentiality like I'd respect yours. You'd expect me to too. But what I can tell you, and I can say this with you know, looking you right in the eye, that this person was treated fairly. And I disagree with many of the things that have been described, but I'm not in a position to debate those. But having some really sort of strong statement about fairness, because that's what really counts.
Yeah.
And you know, if you're able to say it and you say it with sincerity and you say it with integrity, hopefully it will come over. It's hard though, because it's so deafening. All that's going on around you is deafening at that time.
Now, and to Peter's point, as well as Kim's, talking about how you're looking into it, talking about your process, you know, your understanding of what happened, what you're doing about it, what to prevent it in the future. So a lot of times, you know, you need to change your language so you're not perpetuating the hashtag racial profiling or hashtag this is what happened. So you have to analyze all of the media and the language that's being used and start to reframe the narrative. And that takes time. That takes advocates within your organization. That takes customers outside of your organization to take up your battle. And like you had said, Kim, there were people who were advocating for Dunkin while this was going on and helping to change the narrative. And it's a very deliberative and intentional process. But it's understanding what people are kind of latching on to from a hashtag and from a, you know, what is it that's getting everybody wound up? And, you know, what words are they using and how can we start to change those words and replace them with something else, even if it can't be the story?
People absolutely want redemption with this particular situation. And, you know, internally as an organization, and not to say that this particular situation's ever happened before within our organization, but there's been other situations where things are filmed and we've terminated based on the facts that we've realized off of that particular situation, but also down the road, how does that reflect on how we handle this situation now? You know, is that comparable? Is that fair compared to what you did before and how you treated them? You know, and it's all interweb, you know, and it's, and as my father always says, you know, it's the view from where you sit. You know, from where you sit, you see the world, but it is all about where you sit, is how you view that world. And that day, I saw way more views than I needed to be able to try and make a call.
Yeah, one thing on the termination issue, and I completely can see the wisdom of you acting decisively on that day and how it perpetuates itself. What you're seeing in some situations, particularly actually in the sexual harassment cases that suddenly explode, and there's often allegations, you're seeing the pendulum swing in terms of discipline and outcomes. The person I think of most, and I'm not defending him in any way, because I suspect, I don't know all the facts, but as they came out, they were terrible, but was Matt Lauer, because Matt Lauer, the allegations blew up at NBC, and NBC said they were launching an investigation. I think they terminated within just over 24 hours. And that was just a completely understandable corporate decision saying, we don't know what the facts are, but we've got to unhinge from this guy and we'll pay whatever severance he needs or whatever, but our liability is far greater to stay connected because what's coming out, and that's an understandable decision. It wasn't one based on due process and investigation authority. Investigations of complex matters take a long, long time. Yours was a fairly discreet, you know, this happened on that day and there were people there and there was some video. But when you get one where something's allegedly happened over 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, different elements of harassment, you can't do that in a day, you can't do that in a week. It takes weeks to do it and to do it right and properly. But the public pressure, the media pressure for an answer, for a head, because we're in an age of, you know, outrage. People are outraged and they're going to bombard you with their outrage, and the pressure builds to do something. So we're seeing a little bit of the flip side of that, where folks are terminated very precipitously, and then they're making the claim to say, hey, I'm an African American, I was terminated for poor customer service, but there were 4 white guys who work in the same franchise and they done far worse things and they got the slap on the wrist. That's race discrimination. So, you know, these are really challenging issues. You faced it.
We were absolutely faced with that. You know, I needed to make a decision. I couldn't let the actual employees find out what that decision was through the media.
Absolutely.
You know,
Exactly.
I needed to get a hold of them directly.
That's
to
right.
be able to
Absolutely.
have that communication prior to it coming out into the media. So again, trying to be fair, even though a lot of people are like, you don't need to be fair. Well, that's not true. I do. But and also, you know, what you said, I had to make a decision knowing that there were other outlying opinions and noise, I call it, that it could turn into a race issue as well. And there was a high probability of that happening as well.
Kim, you obviously did a great job handling the situation. Did you come away with this and say, when the next crisis happens, I have a procedure manual that you know what to do next time? And was there anything glaringly a mistake that you wouldn't do in the next occurrence?
Yes. I'm always trying to think of.
She wouldn't listen to the lawyers.
Well, I mean, everything else we agreed on. That was the one thing we disagreed on. So, yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, and again, I'm not throwing this person under the bus, but it's an awareness thing and not assuming that you know how big something's going to be. I could have been notified that night that this happened, but it was kind of blown off like, oh, you know, we'll deal with it we'll deal with it today, later today, and it was like, it's not. So it's more of an awareness for my, particularly my operations people, about the change in society and how these things can affect everybody.
Yeah.
So that changed. In terms of crisis communication, I wouldn't say that anything is particularly changed in terms of process, because I think a lot of it worked, but I think that we've all gotten closer to each other because of it. I mentioned that we were kind of trying to work towards a change in structure. That has really opened our eyes to better horizontal communication, because I think, top to down, I think that there was pretty good communication on like, we need this to happen, like right now, like 2 hours ago. So it was the horizontal communication out of the gate, out of this circumstance that has gotten better since then. Don't be afraid to reach out to HR. Don't be afraid to reach out to loss prevention. Don't be afraid to reach out to Kim. So that I think has gotten better.
So if we could hold questions till the end, I think.
Yeah, we put you together the next slide.
Okay, did you want to take a break?
Yeah.
Or?
Did you
Oh, well.
You want to take a quick break and come back? Because there is more that they have. Okay, so 5 minutes, because we only have till 10:30. Okay. Yeah, another one of those.
Assumptions in they are out there. You can get the facts, but, yeah.
Well, it'll be very interesting to hear what finally comes.
It's gonna keep me busy.
Yeah, I think so.
I can always talk at any point in time.
No, I just need to make sure we leave enough time.
Well, let's see how you do with time. I'm fine either way.
Okay, well, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, welcome back. We had a wonderful question in the back about, so did you have a plan? And after all of this happened, did you adjust your plan? So a little bit about my background that's actually not in my bio. So I spent 25 years in banking, and I was the bank security officer for Northeast Bank up in Lewiston. They have a number of branches around. And I was the first one to author the bank security manual. So you can imagine in banking, they do monthly training on robbery. They do monthly training on bomb threats. They do monthly training on hostage takeover. They do training on embezzlement. They do training on disasters, if someone dies, if the president's taken hostage, or if the branches are closed due to social distancing because of bird flu. So we come to the table with a lot of preparation, but in today's world, think about all the worst case scenarios you just heard. Okay? They've all changed. They're all different. And so there's a framework that we like to use on the next slide. Okay. So there's a framework, and we want you to really think about being the first to tell your story. Now, that doesn't mean just get out there and start talking, but be the first to tell your story. And I want you to emphasize your story. And timing is everything, as Peter talked about. So you have to be cognizant of where you are, what's going on, what the time frames are. You also want to be thinking about researching your facts and impacts thoroughly. And I apologize in advance if anyone's offended, but there is no such thing as BS in crisis communication. You either know it or you don't know it. There's no projection, there's no opinion, zero. You either know it, you don't know it, and you need to find it out. And all your W questions, who, what, where, when, how, why, all of those questions. You want to assess your audiences completely
And I didn't put this on the slide, but I want to quickly go through what that means. Who needs to know and who needs to understand, number one, what is going on? Who needs to be involved? You heard Kim talk about, opening the arms and bringing in the truth. Who needs to be involved? Whose advice and support do you need? Okay, who is an expert in this? So there was a very large breach with a very large retailer a number of years ago. And the one organization they never reached out to, and I won't use their name, but the organization was the Maine Bankers Association. And it was the largest breach Maine had ever had, and Maine bankers could have helped reframe what was going on, helped educate customers around the state on what to do. Who needs to help and who can be involved? And who will be affected? Okay, so the employees, families of employees, and who has something to gain or something to lose. So you need to be thinking about all of these stakeholders in a lot of different ways, both internally and externally. Fourth, you need to communicate confidently and consistently. Know what you know and know what you don't know, and continue to evolve that process and evaluate. And one of the things today you cannot be without for reputation management is an automated system for monitoring social media. And that only gets what's going on in the public sphere. There are so many private chat rooms and private groups. A quick crisis we just dealt with a few months ago, we were monitoring and we were finding all of the conversations. And it wasn't until one of the employees who was connected to someone else in a private group let us in and see what was going on. And so we were only finding 3 or 4 comments. It wasn't anything big. And then we went to this private group and the situation was blowing up. Over 250 comments, 200 shares, and it was all private. It was all in the private. So you need to be thinking about who's advocating for us, who's listening for us, and you're evaluating and you're evolving. So you need to brace yourself for crisis and really think that this can happen and does happen to anyone. Your worst case scenario. What's happening at other people's hotels? Are you prepared? Profiling. Could be on the horizon for you. Threats. This threat was a people threat, but we also have systems. Because the way the could this happen? Critical. You do not want to be calling your lawyer or hiring a or looking at your
communication identified. In this state already has phone numbers for probably Sage Security or one of the forensic computer companies ready to come in if something were to happen. We have them in advance. Understand those audiences and what those audiences are capable of doing and or how they can be impacted. Create your messaging, remove the barriers we talked about, understand your social media and practice. Now we could spend an entire day, we could spend an entire week on building a communication plan, practicing it. But we don't have all day, so I need to turn it over to Peter. A little bit more about the HR, the legal, and then we're gonna wrap up with Kim and hopefully have a time for a couple of questions.
Thank you, Linda. I'll be very, very brief on this. One of the things where I've been involved with some clients is echoes exactly what Linda was saying, is you're having your response team identified ahead of time and having those key stakeholders in it. One of the things I had on my list, and it was really interesting to watch that video, clearly, larger organizations identify who is it who's going to be our spokesperson, who's going to be our voice. And I've seen many problems come where that hasn't been planned ahead of time and you get a disparate and diffused message. However, in our new world, look what happened in the store. I'm sure, the Wolak Group doesn't necessarily vest its employees with, you're going to be our spokesperson. But when someone puts a camera in your face and is standing there, they become all of a sudden the spokesperson. And this gentleman's point was a good one. I thought they handled it extraordinarily well in the moment. There was one employee who apologized and somebody shared sort of their own personal experience. Well, not personal experience, but just said, yeah, I felt that way or something along those lines. So, the best plan in the world is, okay, we'll have an official spokesperson, but you can see what happens on the ground in reality. But when something does happen, you are going to want to sort of have your checklist ready versus making it up as you go. And I've been involved in enough situations with clients where they've made it up as they've gone along because they hadn't seen that it's going to happen to them. So you need to have a plan of who contacts law enforcement. When do you contact law enforcement? When do you contact government agencies? So in the case of a spill, or allegation of abuse against a child, there are key people that you have to notify, and you have to notify immediately. And one of the things that organizations can be very, very vulnerable about is if it looks as if you didn't meet those obligations, if you didn't notify people that you were required to notify. I made a little industry out of studying the Penn State scandal for a while. I did a lot of presentations on it. Heather probably had to sit through a few of them. But it was fascinating to watch how an organization the size of Penn State, it's a $1 billion conglomerate, it's massive, and how they bungled the Sandusky issue. And so many lessons can be learned from that. Don't get me off on a tangent, otherwise I will. But their biggest issue was they failed to notify key government agencies about suspected abuse, and that's still haunting them. So you want your checklist. You want to, it's up there as well. You've got to notify your insurer. Your insurer plays a role in these things. The good news is you have insurance. The bad news sometimes can be you have insurance because they can drive sometimes your response. So I'm not going to go through all of it. Time is scarce, but there is that checklist that you want about, okay, who should be doing it? When should they be doing it? So that you're prepared. It's very hard to make up as you go along. Thank you.
So I'll try not to be redundant about what I've already shared, but I guess how I want to start with this is that obviously moving forward, it was all about protecting not only the brand, Dunkin' brands, they were very worried about that, but protecting our own integrity and the perception of our company at this point nationally. So I think Linda said too, you want to get out and you want to tell your story too. And after those first 24 hours, it was a very vulnerable position to be in where I was at. And so I'm not particularly an extroverted person. Actually, public speaking is something that I really truly struggle with. But after this, I really felt like my mission was that I needed to be able to get out, be vulnerable, and be able to share my experience and share how I felt to try and help not only others that may be in my position, but also the people that work for me. So we have a lot of, for instance, closed Facebook groups. And throughout our organization, those closed Facebook groups are network specific of areas within our organization. So I started off by just a personal social media post, but also a post that was within our organization sent out to everybody, managers and above, that just shared a little bit about me and how I was feeling in hopes that it would kind of open them up and feel okay about where we were going. So I'm just going to read that real quick. It says, "Here's my reality, my humanity, and my truth. It was particularly hard to get out of bed this morning. Never once did I doubt that I would, though. I have too much to live for and too many who rely on me every day, most importantly, my kids and family. I've been called every name in the book the last 24 hours on social media over something I didn't do, what I did do, what I should do, and why, and who I was for doing it, not doing it, ignoring it, or responding fast. In other words, it didn't matter who I was as a true person to many out there yesterday and even still today. What I do know, though, is who I am not. Thank you to all who have reached out in the last 24 hours and to those who have worked to make this a little easier on everyone, despite the unfortunate circumstance. Social media can be the devil, but this post is merely to try and inspire someone else's day, I hope. We all have bad ones, but that doesn't define our future or who we are. If anything, I have more confidence of who I'm not by reading all the false accusations the last 24 hours. It hurts to read when you do truly want to always make the right decision and make people happy, but my reality is that I feel stronger today than I was yesterday, so thank you. You will see how determined I am to do right by this. This will bring more good to the communities we serve than we ever thought possible and give more reason for those who know us and work with us to be proud." So that was my first. Quickly, within 24 hours, our team had met with the executive director and founder of We Rise Above the Streets, Al-Amin Muhammad. We had met with the CEO, the chief development officer, and the vocational counselor for the rescue mission of Syracuse. We had met with the program administrator for the city of Syracuse. And we've met with the commissioner, Department of Neighborhood and Business Development in the city of Syracuse, as well as John Tonino, who's the founder of My Father's Kitchen, all within 24 hours of the actual event. That I'm very, very proud of, to get a hold of and make meetings with every single person. I won't go over, we've talked about, I'm 100% on the same page with Linda about, how should you handle the situation. Don't ever minimize the situation, and try to keep an open mind of where this could head for you. Ironically, and there's another kind of separate post real quick, and about a week after this had happened, I had a child at a Portland school write me a letter, handwritten, was in my inbox when I had gotten back from Syracuse after this. And that person was asking for just the employees at one of our Dunkin' to wear orange on Unity Day, which is a day that they stand up against bullying. And I thought, wow, this is a really untimely, so when I heard this, and I get inquiries for support and all that, every day, but when I read this letter, I was just like, holy cow. So I wrote back to the teacher of this student, and I said, yes, absolutely. We're gonna wear orange on that day. Not only are we gonna wear orange at this one location, we're gonna wear it at every single location from here to New York. So we had about 2,000 employees wear orange that day. And that kid was just over the moon. But it was all about standing up against bullying, which to me really is the heart of this entire situation. Since then, we volunteered with Rise Above the Streets on Sandwich Saturday. Employees are always welcome, and they've gone and represented us at that every week. We've had a meeting with the CEO of the Center State of Syracuse, which is about economic development and strategy, to be able to help with homeless outreach organizations. We have actually joined the homeless task force for the city of Syracuse. We've donated $10,000 to the rescue mission in congruence with the brand as well as the Wolak group. We've provided numerous food, beverages for kind of surprise and delight situations within homeless organizations, or whether it's a fundraising event or if they're doing any kind of gathering. We've had John Tomino, who's the founder of In My Father's Kitchen, come and actually do a class for our management in New York, just about homeless awareness and everything from emotional distress to drug use, and how to be able to identify it and be sympathetic and empathetic and know what to do, who to call, how far you should actually reach before crossing the line. You don't want to push too hard, but you want to be able to let people know that you're there for them. Again, we've really gotten involved with the politics of Syracuse and trying to help the situation there. We're also trying to mimic that on a smaller scale here. We've met with Frank Cullen, who does a lot of homeless advocacy here in Portland, and we're trying to kind of do some stuff with them a little bit harder here, believe it or not, to be able to really make a difference. But we've and also reached out to Margot, actually. Oh, good. So we're working with Margot as well. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. I could go all day long about stuff that we're continuing to do to say.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get back.